Hi folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. I talked a couple weeks ago. I vented something that really bothers me, and it became apparent to me in doing sports shows and talking to so many people around the East about their fishing experiences. And one of the things that stood out was the number of people that almost jokingly talked about if they didn't catch the fish they were after, they felt it was a nuisance and it was taking away their chances of catching their preferred fish, so they would throw it on the bank or throw it on the ice and kill it. And I thought, this really, really bothered me. Although I know as a kid, I remember a lot of times when I'd fish for trout in the Genesee River where I grew up and I'd catch a chub, I'd throw it on the bank because I thought it's ruining my fishing, not having any clue about the importance that each species might have. Well, my buddy Dave had rebroadcast my show Talking to You. He does this on his YouTube channel Up North and Why. And he does it a couple weeks after it comes on the radio because I'm doing these shows for our radio stations. But anyway, he rebroadcast this where I talked about people doing that. And he said a lot of people responded. They were really interested in that particular topic and what I had said. And Dave said, it brought back something to me. Dave's daughter married a man from Serbia. Dusan is his name. A fabulous, fabulous guy. He's become a great friend, and I really respect a lot of his ideas about life. But anyway, when Dave went over to Serbia to visit Dusan's family, and they went fishing, and in Serbia, the preferred fish that they go after is carp. And not only do they go after them, but it becomes a choice dinner for them to catch a carp and take it home and eat it. And so Dave was over there and he was telling them stories about when he was younger and catch a carp. Oh my goodness, it was like a trash fish. Now, for all of you that love to catch carp, I'm not saying any of that. But what I'm saying is that our perception might be that at different times of our life or in different areas. And up here, that was often the way people felt. And so Dave was telling them that, oh my gosh, when I was young, living up in northern New York, we'd catch a carp by accident. We'd throw it on the bank, the very thing I'm talking about. And they couldn't get over it. They could not get over it. And they said, well, what were you fishing for when you catch the carp? And Dave said, bullhead. And once he described what a bullhead was, they laughed and they said, oh my gosh, when we catch a bullhead here, we're fishing for carp, we throw the bullhead up on the shore. And so I guess this is a universal tendency. But this really strikes home because even more important than the ignorance that we all might share in not understanding the relativity and importance of every species that's part of an ecosystem, it really shows that the very thing I talk about so often, that every one of us might have a different reward and a different perception of what makes fishing the most enjoyable for us. And I think we tend, a lot of us, to come to idolize a species that others like us tend to idolize. And we think that's the only one that counts. And I've talked about it so often before because when I was young, I couldn't understand that in New England, this was before bass became the national championship of fishing shows. I mean, this is before tournaments were formed and bass fishing was on TV and so forth. When I was a kid and would learn about people in New England, if they caught a smallmouth bass or a largemouth bass, they called them pond suckers, they'd throw them on the bank. They want to get them out of the water because they were hurting their water. Their water was trout water. That's what we all worship, was trout. And a bass fisherman, I mean an avid, dyed-in-the-wool bass fisherman, usually could care less about catching a trout, a muskie, a northern pike. They'll cut their lines rather than waste the time having those fish on their line when they're fishing a tournament. And so, again, overused phrase, but different strokes for different folks really, really is part of the whole fishing world. And I think what it really tells us is that fishing is grander and bigger, and the import and impact of it may be broader than what we might imagine. It might not just be about catching this old fish or that old fish or this big fish or that little fish. I think it's more of a freedom of freeing us from a lot of the confines of everyday life and giving us a chance to breathe again and get out there in nature. And no matter what we want to do, at least we're out there. And that's the key. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.